Greetings, my name is Valerie Staats, and I'm here with my wife, Michelle Schultz, and I'm happy to share my story. Thank you very much for inviting me to do this, because it makes me think back on some things, and it's like, when I do that, I try to look at things as an adventure. And when I do that, it's like, boy, we've really come through a lot. I'm in my early 70s, and I grew up as a young child, I was on a reservation in Canada. And at 4.5, I was playing cowboys and Indians, and unfortunately, there was a real gun sitting in the corner, and I got shot. 4.5 years old, I'm thinking, that's not right. So my sense of justice was born at that moment. And that, with my family, that brought them into Western New York because of Children's Hospital, because I needed multiple orthopedic surgeries after that. And so Children's Hospital was wonderful. It was my first really total social environment of other people and other cultures. It was just opened up a beautiful world. And my family decided to stay in Western New York. I grew up with two brothers, and they would tease me, make me run. So with a handicap, right, they'd really make me angry, and I'm running after them. And they forced me to climb trees and do all kinds of crazy stuff. They said I'd be in a brace for my lifetime, but I shoved that off. So out of all that, I think I learned to be a fighter. With my family history of addiction, I had noticed that I started to experience difficulties with alcohol as well. When something has more control over you than you it. And so I got into recovery, and being in recovery is not just about not drinking, it's about becoming. It's fully yourself in terms of what your role in life is, and what it is that you want to leave behind and such. And so part of that was being open as a lesbian. I had always been open, really. I didn't jump up on tables and say, I'm a lesbian. But early, when I returned to Western New York, because I lived in Rochester that's where I came out. I met some folks in college from Rochester, went there on some weekends and such, and it was like, oh my gosh, it's like taking a breath of fresh air. You can be who you are, and the friends I made, knew I was a lesbian. And so it's like they loved it. I could flourish there. And so I did. I came out in Rochester. And when I decided to come back to Western New York, it was difficult. And so there was this group in Niagara County I joined up with that really fought to bring, and those were difficult times. It was during the HIV crisis and such. And so Niagara County was really swirling with, folks who were saying those people, meaning gay people, are poisoning our population. They belong in, camps. And so we formed this group to give folks in Niagara County, homosexual folks, lesbians, gays, transsexuals. We gave them a place where they could safely talk and be who they are. So that involved a lot of socialization. We shared a lot of dinners. We would go together to different things. And so we, helped uplift each other. And I started to do some cultural work. I'm Native American. I ran from that for most of my young life, because it was like, you need to leave those old things behind and get with, the current times. And so all of those things, we were kind of taught to push those off. And so that's what I did. And then discovered later that my identity really, I was missing big chunks of it. So I started to do some work with a Native American organization in Buffalo. And through that, I started getting involved with addiction services. And I thought, this is kind of crazy. I grew up with an alcoholic family. I grew up with all the craziness and chaos and violence and even sexual abuse that comes with that that kind of family sometimes, too often. And so I've said, I must be crazy to think I want to work in it. I just spent years recovering from it, and why would I want to go back into it? But then discovered that there's something that happens when you start to give back. And so through that process, I came in contact with an addiction treatment center in Buffalo, and I was doing, just some work at their facility, and they said, you'd make a great counselor. And I said, I'm not trained. I'm not social work trained. I'm not trained in any clinical way. And they said, don't worry about that. And I was like, what do you mean, don't worry? So my first meeting was with Shelley at that time, because she was the nurse administrator there. And Shelley had been the nurse administrator there for several years. She went to University of Buffalo, their nursing school, interned at this addiction treatment center, and then when she graduated, went to work for them. And within 3 years, she was the nurse administrator. It moved slowly. Her relationship ended, and so then we went to what we called we had to have our relationship talk, because she's a nurse administrator at the facility. And so it's like, okay, so when we tell our supervisors about our relationship, so before we got into a relationship, we went out to the park, sat in her SUV, kind of like setting like this, sitting in the back, and talked about what we were going to do in our relationship at work. So when we told our respective supervisors, they said, well, really, there's no direct line of supervision there. So that's good. You can, you both stay. So we managed it, I think, in a very good way. I mean, we were good at setting those boundaries, at work, and then, at home. And so it was just, it was a wonderful experience. And we still continued to learn from each other. And certainly I respected her role as the nurse administrator. So we moved in together rather quickly, I must say. And so for some of those initial years, I was supportive of her. She was a pitcher with softball. So a couple of days a week she's out, right? And so I'd go watch her game, bring the dogs, and then we'd stay out there, and that was kind of our routine until I started to do this work in Indian country and I started to do training, and so that started to lead to developing a program. So I developed actually as a statewide program, to bring American Indians into our facility and work with, collaborate with those communities and service providers, and do the kind of the historical trauma part of it. Started to do the kind of work that kept me on the road a lot. And Shelley took care of so much, she had to start taking care of the whole house stuff, the dogs and everything. So when you start to carry that, plus juggle your work, I'm entirely and totally grateful to her for that. After she retired from the nurse administrator position, she had volunteered for the New York State Nurses Association to help nurses who deal with addiction, right? And she would facilitate support groups and such. And so she volunteered for them for years while she was working. And then when she retired from the state, they asked her to join their organization and be the Western New York coordinator for that work. And she took the job because she was young, and she took the job, but it was out of home, and so and it kept, it was very busy. And then COVID hit, and so and through then she's at home having to do things through the computer and such, and that downtime I think was hard. So she started to have trouble with her expense report, because we're both home now, and I could hear, it's like I could hear them talk about a way to do the expense report that I knew they had said the month before. And so it was like, well, that's odd. And so I worked with Shelley on that, and then the third month it was the same thing. And so I'm thinking there's something more going on here. So as it started to affect her work, I said, let's both go get checked out. I'll never forget that day, because they were still following COVID protocols. So she had the mask across her face here, so I could see her eyes. They gave me my results first, and as far as masks and such, and I'm okay. But when they shared with Shelley about the mask and the loss of masks, that she had the look on her eyes, which in her eyes was just I just won't ever forget that. So that day changed everything. For a little bit, I think we just tried to avoid it. We just kept still coming out here and doing our things. But then then it's like with the planting, sometimes, I could see differences happening there. And so things kept going, and it's like, I can't sit still anymore. I have to start doing some things. And I connected with the Alzheimer's Association, said I can't do this alone. I think I can do so much alone, and I do the research, and then, Google this and Google that and set up things. And then it's like, what, just like recovery and addiction, you need to hear from folks who've gone through this and who've dealt with it, both in terms of strategies as well as feelings. And I wanted to have the best for Shell. As a lesbian couple, often right from the get-go, when you pick up the phone to make an appointment, and I'm calling, I'll say I'm right from the get-go, I'll say I'm calling for my wife to make an appointment. Or sometimes you're on the phone with someone and they're asking some questions, and then they'll keep on trying to, they default back into husband, and so you go through that process of saying this is my wife, and they'll I haven't had anyone yet like straight out say like I'm having difficulty dealing with you because that's not my way or something like. I haven't had that kind of difficulty in the matter, in at least in terms of who we've interacted with so far. But sometimes there are things that happen that I wonder isn't just a little sabotaging, right? So it's not up front, but it's like not following through with a phone call or what they say that they're going to do. And I don't jump into, well, it's about that. It could be just about, forgetfulness or ineptness. But sometimes I wonder about that. Going around here is different than going around in our area in Amherst. And so it's like, how does that happen in a country like America, where in one place you have to have a little bit of fear and apprehension because of who you are, and then in another place it can be actually celebrated and uplifted. Folks are being given permission to judge us again. It's like all this work that we've done to show people that we're like every other person, we're like every other spouse, we're like every other family that's dealing with Alzheimer's, we're like every other that's dealing with life's pressures and problems, and we have the same happy, we want to be happy, we don't want to harm anyone, and we want to be contributing citizens and good neighbors. And when I heard they were dismantling the ACL, Administration for Community Living, it was like, enough is enough. I don't know how it's going to impact even the services that we're currently getting. And I'm so grateful for the services that we're getting in terms of assisted living, day treatment, the food services, transportation. Just the whole network of services that help people live independently. Help the caretakers, help their loved ones. Search out those supports that help you be who it is that you are.